Hey guys, we are going to talk about Chapter 9, Cellular Respiration today. Make sure you have one of your Cornell note templates ready to go or your own sheet of paper and have it folded so you can take those notes well. If you need to pause or replay the video at any time, please feel free to do so. I will, at designated points, kind of give you an opportunity to point that out or slow down. But use the pause button or replay as necessary. Alright, and in between slides, you're going to hear that nice respiration noise as we go through each one, either to help keep you awake or just remind you that we're talking about respiration. Section 1 talks about chemical pathways, and some of the key things to remember about this section of the chapter is that food provides living things with the chemical building blocks they need to grow and reproduce. Food is a source of raw materials from which cells can synthesize new molecules, and most importantly, food is a source of energy. Okay, a calorie is the amount of energy needed to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water 1 Celsius degree. Now, to keep it simple, calories are basically how we count the amount of energy that we're taking in from our food. It's always on those nutrition facts section of the boxes of food. You know, if you look on the side of a cereal box, you're going to see the nutrition facts. It's going to tell you how many calories. Okay, that's the amount of energy you're taking in from that type of food source. Now, cells release the energy from glucose and other food components, and they do this starting with a process known as glycolysis. And glycolysis is only going to release a small amount of energy at a time, and we're going to get deeper into that process here shortly. So to break it down, we start off with glycolysis to break down that glucose, and then if oxygen is present, we are going to get a high energy release. If there isn't oxygen present, then that energy release will be limited. And so we're going to talk about each pathway separately. Before we do that, this is occurring in the mitochondrial structure in both plants and animals. We know that plants make their own food through the process of photosynthesis, but then they need to take that food and break it down, and the mitochondria are what do that. And of course, animals, we consume food, and then we need something to break down that so we can put it in a usable form of energy. The mitochondrion is where this primarily happens, or where at least the final stages of cellular respiration happens. So, cellular respiration is a process that releases energy by breaking down food molecules in the presence of oxygen. This is your chemical equation for photosynthesis. Remember that this is basically the exact opposite of photosynthesis. The reactants of photosynthesis are the products of cellular respiration and vice versa. So we have oxygen, and I have it both in the chemical formula and written form, plus glucose is going to give us a product of carbon dioxide and water. And then with cellular respiration, we also have that energy product on the end as well. So I would take some time, possibly pause the video to write down this chemical equation. Alright, this equation does not fully explain cellular respiration because it actually takes place in 3 stages in order to control the energy release. The energy needs to be released a little bit at a time, otherwise it will be too much at once. So the cell traps those little bits of energy by using them to make ATP, which is our fully charged battery of energy, giving out little bursts at a time. The 3 main stages are shown here in this visual, and I don't think it would be a bad idea to go ahead and draw just a rough sketch of this picture. The first stage is glycolysis. The second stage is going to be the Krebs Cycle, and then the Electron Transport Chain is the 3rd stage. Please notice where these stages are happening. If you take a good look, we got glycolysis happening in the cytoplasm of the cell, and then Krebs Cycle and the Electron Transport Chain are both happening within the mitochondrion. I would also like you to make sure in your drawing you include that there is ATP produced from each stage. And as we talk about each stage, fill in your diagram with how many ATP are produced from each separate stage. Okay, so glycolysis we're going to talk about first. It is a process in which one molecule of glucose is broken in half. It also produces 2 molecules of pyruvic acid, which is a 3-carbon compound. A little energy is needed to get glycolysis going, so 2 ATP molecules are needed to produce a total of 4 ATP molecules through glycolysis. Now the net gain then would be 2 ATP molecules from glycolysis. I would add that to the diagram you just drew as the product of glycolysis. NADH. This is very similar to the electron carrier in photosynthesis we knew as NADPH. So NAD plus is an electron carrier. When NAD plus accepts a pair of high energy electrons, it is known as NADH. NADH holds the electrons until they can be transferred to other molecules. So NAD plus helps to pass energy from glucose to other pathways in the cell. So, overview of glycolysis. There is a small energy yield. It is a fast process. It can produce thousands of ATP molecules in a few milliseconds. And it does not require oxygen. If there is not oxygen present, the pathway that we follow is called fermentation. Fermentation releases energy from food molecules in the absence of oxygen. And during fermentation, NADH converts back to NAD+ by passing high energy electrons to pyruvic acid. This will allow glycolysis to continue producing a steady supply of ATP. So because fermentation does not require oxygen, we say that it's in an anaerobic condition, or it's in an anaerobic environment, because anaerobic means not in air. There are 2 main types of fermentation. They are alcoholic fermentation and lactic acid fermentation. Alcoholic fermentation produces carbon dioxide as well as alcohol. Some examples of the producing alcohol or going through alcoholic fermentation would be yeast, and then also making certain beverages. Alright, in cells, pyruvic acid that accumulates as a result of glycolysis can be converted to lactic acid. This type of fermentation is called, conveniently, lactic acid fermentation. This process regulates NAD+ so that glycolysis can continue. Lactic acid is produced in your muscles during rapid exercise when the body cannot supply enough oxygen to the muscle tissues. Larger muscles like your arms and legs, they quickly run out of oxygen because your body is going to protect your vital organs first. And muscles rapidly produce ATP by lactic acid fermentation. And this buildup of lactic acid causes a painful burning sensation. So anytime you maybe run more than you usually do, bike, any type of exercise, a sport, maybe you overexert yourself or push yourself past your normal limits, you might feel some pain in your legs or in your arms. That is a buildup of lactic acid, and it's normal soreness that will go away fairly quickly after some rest. So we're going to move on to the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, the other 2 stages of cellular respiration when oxygen is present. Now after glycolysis, 90% of the chemical energy available from glucose is still unused. And oxygen is a powerful electron acceptor. So with oxygen present, we call this an aerobic environment, and this is how cellular respiration is able to continue on and make the most amount of energy possible. So aerobic means that it requires oxygen or oxygen is available. So the Krebs cycle, pyruvic acid is broken down at this point into carbon dioxide in a series of energy extracting reactions. So remember, that's one of the products of cellular respiration. And this occurs in the mitochondrial matrix, so make sure you reference your diagram. Then we move on to the electron transport chain, and this is a process that uses high energy electrons from the Krebs cycle to convert ADP back into ATP, remember that fully charged battery. This takes place in the folds of the inner membrane of the mitochondria. Now the totals for the total process of cellular respiration with oxygen present are 36 ATP. This is about 38% of the total energy of glucose. A lot of the rest of that energy is released as heat. Here is the total breakdown of ATP from each stage, so make sure on that diagram you drew, you put down the total ATP from each process. So you will notice, like I said earlier, glycolysis, 2 ATP. During the Krebs cycle, we have 2 ATP plus carbon dioxide as a product. And then the electron transport chain has a net gain, the largest net gain of 32 ATP, and that's where we get this total of 36. Okay, so that is all for today in Chapter 9. Again, please go back if you need to repeat anything, pause, whatever you need to do. Make sure you get down some good notes and be prepared for that quiz tomorrow. Have a good day.